My name is Madeleine Fullard, and I'm the head of the Missing Persons Task Team in the National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa, the NPA. And our mandate is to trace those who disappeared in political circumstances between 1960 and 1994. And currently we are working also on those who died outside South Africa's borders whilst in political exile.
My name is Troy Peely. I'm the manager of the Repatriation and Restitution Office within the South African Heritage Resources Agency. Primarily the role of the RRO is to coordinate the repatriation and restitution program in accordance with the national policy on repatriation and restitution of human remains and heritage objects. So the key priority within the program is the Exile Repatriation project, which mainly focuses on identification of graves of South Africans that are associated with the liberation struggle and died outside the borders of South Africa, mainly within the SADC region. And the project is an intergovernmental project that is coordinated within SAHRA.
So Angola was a Portuguese colony until 1975, when the regime in Portugal collapsed or fell, was overthrown, and that led to both Angola and Mozambique, the Portuguese colonies, essentially, which had been waging their own internal liberation struggles to achieve independence. So from that perspective, there was a kind of liberation movement alliance between countries, especially around Southern Africa. South Africa essentially chose to support what was seen as an anti-communist structure in organization in Angola called UNITA, whereas the ANC was in alliance with the MPLA, which South Africa liked to depict as a sort of communist. We're talking Cold War language here. It's the era of the Cold War and so on. So it was really, in a sense, the theater of war reflected the Cold War dynamics at the time. In 1960, the government banned the anti-apartheid organizations, the African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and so on. And effectively, over the next, especially from 1961 to 63, a massive security force crackdown on all political activity, with thousands of people being sent to prison on Robben Island, and hundreds being placed under house arrest or under banning orders. And many people had no option but to flee the country. And so that's really the origins of people fleeing into exile. And we have, several tens of thousands of people who left the country in the 30-year period between 1960 and 1990. For example, one of our colleagues was part of the youth organizations. He was also part of the internal political and military underground. And he was charged, he was arrested and charged and given a prison sentence. And he decided that he would rather, leave the country, be trained and come back to fight apartheid. So there were multiple circumstances that drove people into exile. As I understand it, in 1976, the new Angolan government, after the fall of colonial rule, made training camps available to the ANC. Some of them were old Portuguese farms, for example. And so the camps often constituted just a few buildings, maybe the farmhouse and a few outbuildings that provided some basic infrastructure, and then the training camps were structured around those premises. Historically, there have been cases where families or individuals repatriated the remains of those who died in exile. But there was never a government effort as such to recover those people. And so when you look at it in terms of the criteria used by the TRC in terms of, community reparations, one community that was really affected by political violence was political exiles. They were driven out of the country of their birth, they lost their citizenship, and they never had the opportunity to return home, and they died in exile in a variety of circumstances. Some natural causes, some cross-border raids by the South African security forces, some died in vehicle accidents, also some suicides, which is a very sad feature of the exile experience. And many of the families had no information or knowledge about where they were or what had happened to them, or they had some information, but the possibilities of recovering the remains was just, practically not feasible. And so as we were working on missing persons inside the country, we as Missing Persons Task Team, we had a lot of families approach us to say, please help, search for my child or my brother or sister who disappeared or died in exile. We developed an implementation plan with 6 phases for each country. We also are using what we call the country-to-country model, which means that we try to trace and repatriate groups of exiles from each country, rather than just doing individual repatriations, which is a far more costly and time-consuming process. Doing a collective approach means that it's far quicker and it's far more cost-effective. So we then launched the Exile Repatriation Project in September 2024, and that was with the first group of repatriations from Zambia and Zimbabwe. And we then began looking further afield to see what other countries we should focus on next. And Angola is certainly the country that has the highest number of deceased exiles. And that's because the ANC was based in Angola during a time of intense political conflict in that country. And the ANC fought alongside the MPLA in Angola and incurred a number of casualties. So we're looking at between 300 and 400 MK members who died in Angola in the period from 1976, when the ANC first opened its training camps there, up to around 1990, 1991.
For the 2025-2026 financial year, Angola has been identified as one of the priority countries for implementation of the exhumation and repatriation project. And the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Honorable Mr. Gayton Mackenzie, gave an instruction that Angola should be prioritized for the current year. Hence, the team started engaging with military veterans that were based in Angola to get a sense as to the location of camps and what challenges are there that would somehow be a hindrance for a successful implementation of the mapping and surveying phase of the project. So the decision was made that military veterans would need to be actively involved due to the fact that they have an understanding as to where the camps are located.
From the Missing Persons Task Team, we brought 4 of our members, myself as the head, Ambrose Ndlovu, one of our forensic investigators, who also himself trained in Angola and has familiarity with both the camps in the north and in the east, as well as the Vienna training transit camp, for example. So he has like a double role to play there. And we also had we had a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Kavita Laka, and forensic archaeologist, Claudia Bisso. We identified 3 zones of work. The first was Luanda and its surrounds, and we identified 3 cemeteries within Luanda that were known to have been used for burials at some point, and that was Santa Ana Cemetery, Alto das Cruces Cemetery, and Mulemba 14 Cemetery. So that's the one zone. The second zone is what we call the Northern Front, which centers around the town of Kibashe, Piri, Pango, Paredes, Ukua, and that cluster, that sort of geographical cluster, is where several ANC camps were based, as well as battle sites. And then the third zone is what we call the Eastern Front, which is essentially Malanje province, and that is centered around the training camp of Kakulama, the town of Malanje, and there were battle sites as well in Kakuso. The ANC had a farm in Kela, and other skirmishes and so on that took place around the area. And we have between 50 and 60 names of individuals who perished in that zone. So those were our 3 zones, and we spent roughly a week in Luanda, a week in, a bit longer in the Northern Front, and less than a week in the Eastern Front. Phase 2 is what we call grave mapping. And that's where we come and make an on-site assessment of what graves can be located, physically located, and we literally must photograph them, take the GPS coordinates, see are we able to identify who may be in that grave. And out of that grave mapping, phase 2, we're able to generate a report from which we can develop a logistics plan for phase 3. And phase 3 is exhumation and repatriation.
Angola has various complexities as to the location of graves, the manner of burials, due to the fact that it was a war zone. The South African freedom fighters were in Angola when there was a civil war that lasted between 1975 to about 1993-94. So the participation of the military veterans added value to the mapping phase, because they would corroborate information that was contained within the list that the team had compiled from various records in South Africa, And also they could corroborate where the burials were within the camps and also municipal cemeteries. So they were quite useful in that case, because it's only them that know where the burials were, and most of those deaths were not recorded within Angola. As I did indicate, it was during a conflict period in Angola. So hence it's only veterans that know, that even provided information as to how they conducted the burials, which is quite useful for the team to be able to plan for the next exhumation and repatriation phase.
Every cemetery has got its own challenges. Every cemetery has got its own structure, its own methodology, and it's kind of shaped by the people who operated it, as well as the burial culture of that country. And in Angola, as is the case in many, let us say, countries of Latin colonial occupation by Portugal, Spain, or whatever, that in terms of burials follow a practice called recycling, which is that, and this is very hard for us to grasp as South Africans, because for us, you know, you're buried and a grave is forever. There you lie for eternity. But it is not the case here. So, you know, you're buried, and after 5 years, the grave can be recycled unless the family purchases it as a family burial site. And from there on, those sites won't be recycled. But the rest are recycled every 5 years. What does recycling mean? Recycling can mean various things. Recycling can mean that they simply bury people on top, or it can mean that they actually remove the remains from the grave and bury people in them. And those removed remains are taken to an ossuary or disposed of elsewhere. So essentially, the remains of those persons may not physically exist any longer. And that has been really hard to deal with and to accept. And it's going to be a real challenge for us to explain this to families, that this is not an unusual practice. It's actually quite common in many parts of the world, but we are not used to it. It's kind of shocking, I think, for many South Africans to hear that after 5 years you're going to be removed from that grave and your remains will be disposed of elsewhere. So yeah, this is the environment of working in different countries with different cultural practices around death and burial. And that is also going to place limits on the numbers of people we can recover from municipal cemeteries in Angola that practiced recycling. When we arrived here, and the first day we went to the cemetery, I was actually quite overwhelmed to think what it must be like to return to the country where you lost so many of your compatriots. And meanwhile, you've lived a life. In fact, you've become old, because the veterans we are with, they are, getting on in years. And I suddenly thought, it's actually quite a responsibility, emotional responsibility, what we're doing here, bringing people back. Many of them, some were diagnosed with PTSD and really battle with the memories of those battles, conflicts, deaths, and losses. I think they've handled it really well. And, another case, we went to Cachito training camp, And the grave we located there is the young man who grew up opposite one of the veterans with us. They were childhood friends. They played soccer together. They knew each other well. And that military veteran has had to see the family for the last 30, 40 years. He came back alive and their son didn't. And the kind of pressure that places on survivors who have to face families of those who died. This has been a unique experience. We didn't do it in Zambia and Zimbabwe, but having them with us it's just, you know, we move into this level of depth that is unique and makes the events so vivid. It's not just about recovering, you know, human remains, bones, and transferring them from one country to the other. But it's about saying that this process of defeating apartheid had huge personal consequences, community consequences, family consequences, and recognizing the lives of those who paid that price. Usually what we do is we spend time assessing that burial context as a whole. If, let's say it's a cemetery, what are the burial practices in that cemetery? What is the structure of that cemetery? Are there particular sections that are used in particular years? Do the graves move horizontally, vertically? Each cemetery might have its own burial patterns. And we really wish everyone would just adopt one single international grave burial system, but it's not like that. And so, yeah, so we have to, you basically need to understand how that cemetery functioned. From all those different contexts then, from GPS, marking the GPS coordinates of each site, we are able to generate a map that shows where all the graves are, and we can develop a logistics plan for how we're going to exhume those remains. Because one will require an excavator, one will require teams of workers, one will require a demining team, one will require the permissions from the municipalities. So each context has its own set of requirements and needs. So the grave mapping process enables us to develop that logistics plan and come back and exhume and recover as smoothly and as speedily as possible.
The mission was quite a success in a sense that the team was able to identify graves, and we also need to acknowledge that Angola has many complexities as far as the location of graves of South Africans is concerned, which are mainly in very remote areas that are not easily accessible. Also, there's quite a huge number of deaths of South African military combatants in Angola. So the repatriation project would be implemented in different phases of the next couple of years. So from the initial planning of the Exile Repatriation project, it was the project would be implemented in Angola over quite a number of years, and hopefully by the last phase we would have been able to recover more graves, and would also have been able to concretize a plan for how those graves that were not recoverable would be memorialized, with a full participation of the families so that their wishes are taken into consideration in that regard.
In terms of the successes, we have had some really amazing moments. You know, finding the grave of Isaac Maseko, his combat name was Freedom Sikiti, from Mamelodi, and being with Elijah Mahlangu, the veteran who grew up next to him and who could literally take a photograph of the grave and send it to his family in Mamelodi. That was really an incredibly joyful moment. I think also the amazing support we've had from the Angolan authorities at national level, at provincial level, at municipal level has just been so incredible. And you really feel the sense of a shared experience going through that period together. The governors of the provinces met with us and assured us of every level of support which was delivered. You know, it's easy to make promises, but they really came through. And the local administrators, the local chiefs that we met with, two of them actually led us physically through the forest to Camp 13. We literally marched with that local chief. He opened the road. And the Angolan authorities had conducted demining. We found them busy in action, demining Camp 32. They had cleared the entryway of a sort of a path to Camp 13. We couldn't have done that without that level of support and assistance. I think they really exceeded what we asked for, and we really owe the Angolan government and all of its structures, the communities, the local youth from the village who came with pangas, machetes, and literally cleared the bush in front of us for hours. That kind of level of support and community embrace was just amazing, and it's hard to say thank you. The South African Embassy here, who provided outstanding support in terms of personnel, advice, input, counsel in difficult situations, and really had to grapple with, you know, kind of a large delegation that had multiple elements to it, and they had to manage that, and the South African Embassy really did a fantastic job.